Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with a new series devoted to the idea of musical turning points, moments when a composer radically revamped or changed his style or looked in new aesthetic directions. And this is actually, I think, a really cool topic because we all have composers who we particularly love and we like certain works. And those works are sometimes iconic and popular, and then the composer went and did something else. And everybody just went, oh my God, what was he doing? Well, sometimes he was doing something wonderful and equally popular. Sometimes he was doing something less popular and, to some listeners anyway, a lot less wonderful. I can't judge one or the other. Basically, it's up to the individual listener. But there's no question that there are, sort of broadly speaking, two kinds of composers. The ones who were born with a style already fully formed because they were like compositional geniuses and they didn't really grow or develop much. I couldn't say grow. They all grew. I mean, they have no choice, right? They grow. And decline. Yeah, let's not forget that. But their style didn't change hugely. They worked within what you might call the common practice of their era. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. If they were geniuses and fabulous at working in the common practice of their era, then they wrote fabulous music. But there are also some who changed constantly and developed and evolved. Sometimes they evolved in stages gradually. Sometimes there was a huge lurch in another direction. How that happened and who it happened to and what they did, I think is just a wonderful way to enrich your listening and think about some of the composers who we know and love particularly well. And so we're beginning with Sibelius. And the work in question, the moment of change, the new direction, is his Third Symphony. Now, this is one of those cases where the piece that represents the new direction was not necessarily popular. Certainly, the Third Symphony is probably Sibelius's least frequently performed work in the symphonic realm. It's really kind of astonishing because it's a masterpiece. It's an absolutely fabulous piece of music, but its style is so different from the ones that we're used to. And that's the point. What happened to Sibelius? What did he do? Well, first of all, he was in Finland, and his proximate styles in his early works were the Viennese classics, but the modern ones. Liszt on the one hand, to a certain extent, Brahms. I remember talking to members of the Sibelius Academy, and they were, claiming that Sibelius is closest to Brahms in his style. And I was like, you must be kidding. And German musicians, German orchestras, I know for a fact, if you were to say to them, oh, Sibelius is just like Brahms, they would look at you like you were insane. So but that's what they were. That was their ideal, because Germany was Sibelius's principal market. If you were, living, in the hinterlands back in the early days of the 20th century and the late 19th century. But it was Liszt and Tchaikovsky was a huge influence on Sibelius, initially. And his first two symphonies reflect those influences. They are big, romantic, yummy, nationalistic kinds of works. And people love them for just that reason, especially the Second Symphony, but the First Symphony as well. When he came to write the Third Symphony, Sibelius had a radical awakening. His style became, neoclassical. And it became neoclassical well before people like Stravinsky and those people were becoming neoclassical. He doesn't get any credit for it, for being, for initiating that change, that return to proportion, to economy of means. The orchestra is smaller, the tuba is gone, there's no extra percussion. He's just working with double woodwinds, no extra instruments at all. I mean, the music is still incredibly colorful and beautifully orchestrated, but he's writing in to try and make the most out of his material, as Haydn and Mozart and Beethoven did. The symphony only has 3 movements. There is no scherzo-type movement. I mean, everything about it is original. And the finale of the Third Symphony is one of Sibelius's most original things, because nothing happens until the very end. It consists of fragments that gradually assemble themselves into a broad tune. And once that tune achieves its fullest expression, the music just stops. It's not one of those fulfilling romantic conclusions. It's chugging along rather nicely, and then all of a sudden it's just yap, yap, da-dam, end. And it's kind of shocking, just how concise everything is in the Third Symphony. It's still a good half hour long. It's not like tiny, but it's amazingly well put together and fascinating. The more you listen to it, its melodic material is totally captivating, but it has a freshness and a vitality to it. There's no romantic decadence. There are no big slushy tunes on the violins that everybody loves. And most importantly of all, perhaps, in the Third Symphony, it moves. It has an entirely new concept of movement, something the classical masters had. Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven, they don't have dead spots in their music. Their music is constantly pushing forward because of its harmonic rhythm, if you may want to call it that. Well, Sibelius evolved his own style of doing that, which is really, really powerful and exciting. It involves ostinatos, that is, repeated rhythmic things going chugga, 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 and something they call in the music business pedal points. Pedal points are persistent notes that hang on with shifting harmonies, usually above them. And in Sibelius, he will initiate a pedal point, and you'll hear it very clearly in the opening of the Third Symphony. Build up a big climax till the tension becomes unbearable because the music is trying to get away from that harmonic grounding, and then it'll shift to a different harmonic basis, a different pedal point, like the snapping of a rubber band. And it's really a powerful way of making the music move because it feels like it's surging to something and then it's somewhere else doing it again. It's really marvelous. And Sibelius was very conscious of that. He said the orchestra needed a pedal, and that's what he was doing with it. So you hear this first and most powerfully in the very, very opening of the Third Symphony. So I'm going to give you a couple examples just to let you know what I'm talking about, and we will take it from there as the series progresses. So let's hear just a little bit of the big, yummy tune from the finale of the First Symphony. That's the, Sibelius at his most Tchaikovsky-like. It's delicious, wonderful. I mean, it's no wonder everybody loved it. Of course they did. We have Sakari Oramo with the Iceland Symphony Orchestra in Naxos. Here it is. And now, let's listen to the first couple of minutes of the first movement of the Third Symphony. As I said, listen to how the music surges forward and continually builds these sort of dissonant climaxes. Not dissonant, it's dissonant not in the like gnarly, awful chords and things. Dissonant meaning there's tension building up top to bottom in the music. And then suddenly when the second theme comes in and the cellos, we're totally elsewhere. It's marvelous the way Sibelius handles that, but he keeps it moving all the time in different ways with all of these ostinatos and rhythmic figures that never let the music stop. And when he does stop, which he will towards the end of the section I'm going to play you, the music really does stop. I mean, in other words, it's a pause and a moment of relaxation before the tension starts to rebuild. And that sense of timing, of knowing when to move, when to relax, how to move and relax, was always something that Sibelius was handled in a masterly fashion. The only problem he had with this wonderful new system was how to make the music stop. because he builds up so much energy and so much tension that sometimes he's sort of two minds as to how to make it end. The end of the finale of the Third Symphony is a case in point, actually, of that happening, because it's just going and going. You want it to just keep going, but it doesn't. It stops. And how convincing that stopping is will be, of course, up to each individual listener to decide. So here is the opening of the Third Symphony, first movement. I'm sure you can hear the difference in style. One is a big, huge, gushing, slushy, romantic melody. The other is small motives and melodic ideas, all floated atop this energetic rhythmic foundation. And it's a completely different style. But one of the consequences of this is that Sibelius's symphonic output divides into two big sections, the first and second symphonies, and then everything that came later. And as I've talked about numerous times in reviews of this music, conductors tend to be really good at the first stuff if they're like good Tchaikovsky romantic conductors, and not so good at the rest, or really good at the rest, as a lot of modern conductors are, because they're not into the romantic idiom at all, but they underplay and undercharacterize the first two symphonies, which of course are the ones everybody loves the most. So it's an issue for interpreters, for future interpreters. He set up a little conundrum that they have to solve. Most of them don't. The smartest ones just don't play the music that they're not sympathetic with. It's very, very interesting that Ormandy and Karajan, the great Sibelius conductors of the past who were so into the first couple of symphonies, basically. I mean, a couple of the later ones, like the creepy, spooky fourth or the heroic fifth, they never touched the third. They just didn't understand it. It was so different from what they expected. But today, I think in hindsight, we can see that as a good thing, as an aspect of Sibelius's burgeoning genius, his inner development, and his courage to take the music to places that it hadn't been before, whether in his output or in the aesthetics of Western romantic music more generally. And in doing so, he created his own very, very personal and very powerful and wholly convincing and totally wonderful new style. It was a turning point. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.